Hello and welcome back to Processing the Process, where we capture and discuss the technical, psychological, and contextual dynamics that shape the process of creating a work of art. Week by week, moment by moment, we're following Allie K. Dakers, teacher, actor, director, and producer, as she shapes the development of her innovative middle school drama club program and guides her students' idiosyncratic artistic journeys. Today, we will be taking a look at the March 6th drama club meeting. Now, as we've come to know, every single element of Allie's curriculum has a purpose, even the warm-up. So in the case of the March 6th meeting, the warm-up and the introductory game served as arenas that promoted some key skills, including directing skills, operating independently, collaboration, and also the ability to see the big picture as well as its constituent pieces. All of this from a warm-up. Allie, do you find that at this point in the season that you select and approach your warm-ups in such a way as to find greater opportunities for more advanced development of these kinds of skills and ensemble building, even though on the surface, maybe to our colleagues or even to me, it appears that the objective of the warm-ups are to discharge energy and have a good time. But it's really more than that.
Yeah, it's definitely more than that. The most important element of a warm-up, and most performing groups or both adults and kids, it's sort of a boundary. It sets a boundary from where we were before to where we are now.
Yes.
It helps us to refocus. In addition to all the things that you mentioned, getting out that energy, finding camaraderie, having fun, loosening up together. It really does kind of create a working space. I kind of want to use the word sacred in a way, not in any religious context, but just in the context of that this is different from any other time that we are working throughout our day. We honor it with reverence and respect. We know this is the only time we have to devote to the activity that we're about to work on together, and we care about this work. So that's why I like to use that word in that way. In terms of working on skills and making more of like an advanced understanding of our skills through a warm-up, we're starting to really see the kids utilize the directing skills that I've sort of been peppering in along the way, reminding them use a clear voice, get their attention with respect. Now we're adding layers to that of you can slow down or speed up the various movements of the warm-up, making it almost like an artistic choice, if you will. There's a vision that you have in mind that you're shaping, and how do we express that so somebody else can follow that and follow that clearly and concisely and accurately. And on the other side of that coin, you have the entire group now realizing, like we're not just all playing a game here. We're not just all doing our shakedown to start or a big stretch up and down to loosen up a little bit. We have an intention, which is to follow what this person is going to do, because they could change it up on us at any moment. And an understanding that as we move forward with the scene work that we're going to end up doing with their original pieces, they have to learn how to give focus, maintain focus on somebody else, and understand that it's nobody being bossy. It's their job at that moment. So understanding that is pretty understanding on both sides of that relationship. So.
And I see that it really is an arena where it seems to me to make sense to start building those skills, because it's something they're very familiar with by now. So it's not just a matter of, oh gosh, I'm learning skills on how to direct a scene. I mean, that's a whole big leap in terms of knowledge base.
Yes, of course.
The kids can do the warm-up exercises in their sleep, basically. So I would imagine that's a perfect time then to go in and play.
Yes, and to layer.
With it. And to layer and reduce the anxiety, I would imagine, that would come potentially with assuming that role.
Exactly. And they are becoming more accountable on both sides of the relationship. I might tell to a small group, like, give me a 5, 4, 3, and that small group of like 3 kids will be like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and everybody shushes. And I think we might have mentioned this last time too. Now the group is starting to understand. Like, I'll hear a shush kind of like roll through the whole crowd until it's all quiet, because some people might not have heard that 5, 4, 3 all the way across the space that we're working in. So they are actually stepping up on sort of all fronts, and the way in which maybe they're circled up, but they're not focused yet. They weren't really necessarily told to be just yet. Part of that job of that first person on the sly, I'm like, hey, so-and-so, like, start the warm-up, like, you're doing the first part. And so that person's job is also to get the attention of the entire group and arrange the entire group and give them the instruction, now we're circling up, let's get into our circle. So it's not just like a little thing here and there. It's like, here, take control with respect of all of these bodies that all are all over the place right now. Bring them together. And they're now able to do that. We have our ups and downs, as any group of kids does, herding kittens sometimes, but they're understanding the difficulties of that, and they're all doing more in each of their own ways to make it more successful each time we do it. So.
And I imagine even for our veteran teachers, there are times when herding those kittens is not so easy.
No.
Right?
No.
So kudos to these kids for their attempts to do so. Well, when that had concluded, Allie did a pitch meeting review, which in essence gave the kids an opportunity to express any messages, ideas, or themes that perhaps had occurred to them, but they had not yet shared with others. And this was sort of, I guess, your last opportunity to really put it out there. And once that had concluded, Allie began the section called The Introduction to Dramatic Scene Structure. And this, of course, is the foundation upon which playwriting rests. So, Allie, to do this, you used a handout describing elements of, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this German dramatist's name properly, Freitag's dramatic story arc, to introduce the kids to this concept. Can you explain what Freitag's dramatic story arc is and how you used it with the kids?
Yeah. He was a German dramatist who studied classical various styles of theater and many styles of theater of his time and prior. He's in the 1800s, and he basically created a structure that he noted a lot of these stories were following. So he kind of gave us a modern view on how to interpret this, and then also how to use that to give ourselves structure as we create. So it's not anything that the older kids are not familiar with. They may not have the gentleman's name or whatnot, but in terms of like their ELA class, their English classes, we understand also these elements of storytelling. Right. So we have that triangle shape where we have our exposition, we have our rising action. Somewhere along there, conflict is created in some way. All these different events build up to our climax, which a lot of kids are like the most exciting part. Not always. Sometimes I like to look at it more as a turning point, which a lot of people do. I'm not originating that understanding. Typically at that point, characters have to make a decision of some sort or faced with something major that does kind of shift something within them or shift the context of the world that they're in dramatically, and they need to react to that. And once we have that moment, we kind of then have our falling action, where we see all these different sort of elements starting to resolve a little bit, and we see what happens after that turning point. And our denouement is we're tying up all those loose ends. We're finding our resolution there. So a lot of these kids already know these terms. They may not know denouement. That's more a theatrical term in my understanding. But they know exposition. They know that's where we meet the characters, where we find out where we are, when we are. They know about rising action. They know that conflict is, makes a story juicy, and conflict is typically in most of the stories that they've been exposed to. They know all of these different terms, so now it's an understanding of how does this apply to us in the world that we're creating, in the way that we're working with this, and what can we do to create strong storytelling and not just a series of events that move along an arc, So we do break down each of those things because I want everybody to be on the same page. So I do have a handout that's very rudimentary in the language, so that we have 11 through 14. That's a pretty big age gap and a poignant one. They're little kids, and some of them are quite immature. In general, 11-year-olds, they can range in their maturity. Some 6th graders too are even coming in as 10-year-olds, which can happen too. So you have this big vast leap, so I keep the language accessible for all the age groups that are going to be dealing with text that I give them to learn from. But we did another spirit read, which we like, of these very short descriptions. Prior to the spirit read of some of the details I want them to include, I do ask the group, what do we know about this? What comes first? What comes next? Because I want to trigger their thinking and also see where they're at, and give them, as we've discussed too, ownership of the conversation too. It's not just me teaching them, it's we're having a conversation, a discussion about this, and building on our understanding of what we know already. So we use this story arc with descriptions, and I also provide for them a blank sheet, like a blank one, that they can then use in their own processing. Yeah. So that's going to be pretty important as we begin to keep track of these stories that can literally go in a million directions. So what I do ask of them is some documentation. They take different choices on how they want to document the progress of their work. I provide for them the blank analysis, the blank arc with different, places denoting these different aspects, which they can modify as needed. So that's something I'm giving them, very structured, a graphic organizer in that way. Some kids will just brainstorm, concept map something in the center, and ideas bursting out because they don't necessarily have a flow yet, but they know there's ideas and things they want to include. And then you have other kids, in terms of writing down, other kids that are like making lists. What can we include? What should we have in there? So you have all these different sort of ways of seeing how these ideas formulate, which is pretty cool. And other kids too. Other kids, they can come up with their own ways of creation as well.
Sure.
So like through improvs and stuff like that. So we have the hands-on, I like to write it, and we have the kids up, I like to do, and then jot down what I've done. So 2 ways in, and I'm sure there's 1,000 other ways in beyond that, but that's kind of the way that I introduce options in the beginning.
Exactly. And then the companion piece, shall we say, to the structural elements were included in Allie's discussion about what she calls collaboration guidelines, which are in essence strategies for good working partnerships. So, Allie, can you share with us what you feel the elements are that really must be in place for a successful collaboration?
Listen to each other, take turns to speak. That should be in kind of any partnership, I feel. But in sharing ideas that you feel strongly about, it's important to let them be heard. I also feel that an idea that is brought to light I want the kids to have an opportunity to fully explain what they have so far before anyone starts to comment on those ideas. This serves two purposes. One, students waiting and listening, practice that skill of being patient and not just waiting to talk, but also listening. Like, the expectation is they will comment, right? But you need to have all the information before you can really make an educated and informed, articulate comment, basically, that can be useful. We want to stay away from, oh, that's not going to work, or, oh, I don't think that that's good, right? We need all the information, because when we make a comment, you need to back it up with your reasoning and with respect, right? So we want to make sure that that's there before analyzing. Also, be efficient. We only have so much time. Now, this is where we get into that sticky situation. As a creative person, I don't necessarily want to be like boxed in and told to be efficient with how you create. Like, that's sort of counterintuitive, you know. But we've got a deadline.
We have a reality.
So yeah, I have had scripts in the past that go on and on and on and on and on. And as great as they are, this isn't like, a 10-episode season on one of our new streaming networks. So we don't have that kind of time. We don't have that kind of length to put huge, large pieces on the stage. So we want to keep it efficient in terms of the length of our scenes. We want to try, and I do give strategies, and we talk about ideas and what can be left out, what can be strengthened, so we don't need to add all this other stuff. How do we tell more of the story in a smaller amount of time? Right. Because we can. They're young, so they can kind of go off. And then you end up in this like amorphous cloud of characters and events, and you're like, what's happening? And then we want to practice streamlined storytelling. Right. And some of those stories do branch out, and that's okay, as long as we have structure with how to attack getting that process completed. So I might have a lead writer, like we've discussed in the past. It's their idea, their nugget, if you will. We've used that term as well. And maybe there's a team of like 6 or 7 kids working with that main lead writer, and maybe we can then branch out. This scene maybe has 3 different, elements to it, 3 different sections of how it moves along that arc. Well, you're going to take care of the exposition. You're going to take care of, some of the events that lead us to the climax. And maybe the climax is something we can't know yet. So we're going to break out into like 3 groups to create some events, and then together come back to figure out how does that then shift for our turning point. So we can break out into groups, regroup, bring it all together, and then move forward more efficiently and with more clarity, I guess you could say.
And as you were speaking, I was thinking about 2 elements that are very much part and parcel of your process with the kids, and has always been. And one is an egalitarian culture. Perhaps I'll call it diva-less. Or at least shooting for that. Yes. And another, seemingly opposite maybe, but understanding the chain of command and where you are in the group with any given group endeavor. Would you say that, for example, those 2 pieces are critical elements that will determine the success of a collaboration? As well as the ones we've been talking about.
That's a really good question. I consider that to be not just success of this process or project that we're working on, but I think in life you have to be able to wear both hats. You have to know when it's time to step up and be strong and brave to do so, and also clear with intention. But you also have to kind of know when you can recognize strength in somebody else and say, yes, I'm going to concede. Not because I can't, not because I'm just going to like rudely let this person take over, but it's a give and take. Everything is always going to change throughout our lives and where we are in a relationship with groups of people. So to have the skill to be able to be flexible without any kind of like emotional judgment or layering or any kind of like negativity tied to that, I think that's a skill that anyone can kind of benefit from. in the context of this work, it's essential. And I think that that's one of those things that can transcend the stage and transcend the playwriting process, and I hope is something that I'm giving to them to take with them. So.
Oh, I think so from what I've heard, because you've really cultivated an environment where I think those are really the hallmarks of the way they operate day in and day out. So to me, you've set the stage.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah.
No pun intended, right? Yeah. For them to be able to have, even if they can't necessarily fully articulate it, have an internalized understanding of how one works under those circumstances. So I would be interested in your assessment of the collaborative aspects as we move forward.
Yes. It'll be a bumpy road.
We'll
have some ups and downs for sure.
Exactly, but I wonder if those would become bigger peaks and valleys had they not.
That is very true. I mean, that we definitely are trying to avoid destructive conflict. Conflict is conflict. It happens. It's good to dip our feet and work with it. But outright stubbornness and complete barricading yourself off from being able to have these discussions to unravel the conflict and smooth it out. Those are the skills that we're hoping to build here.
Right. So stay tuned, because I think we'll be able to see this in real life settings. So here now the kids are armed with a structural and organizational roadmap on one hand, and a set of collaboration strategies on the other hand that they can take with them now and break up into their groups and begin the playwriting process. And you may recall that Allie spoke about in our last videocast and spoke to the kids of her intention in the week between last meeting and this meeting to go through all of the different, using the term nuggets again, nuggets of ideas, and start grouping similar ones together so that you would have this group of ideas with a sort of overarching, bigger picture idea sort of on top. And in this way, Allie modeled for the kids how to create structure so that they can then begin to create structure for themselves by using the organizational tools that we've been discussing. So, Allie, how did you explain to the kids in this particular meeting what you had done in the intervening week and how that work would enable them to springboard into fleshing out those ideas and beginning to shape them in a way that could turn into a scene?
Well, first, I told them these are not set in stone because it is an organic process. I also didn't want kids who might have seen their idea tucked under something they never would have considered being related. So I say, listen, we need to start somewhere. These are all of the great ideas that you guys brought to the table. This is where I think maybe they could work. I mean, we mentioned last time, like the pirate and the pineapple fighting. Okay, that's a very small nugget and maybe not useful, but maybe, hey, who knows? We also had that choose your own adventure idea mentioned. So maybe some sort of wacky thing happens where all of a sudden we're now on a pirate ship, and there's another something and there's pineapples being lobbed, who knows, right? I also don't want the kids, I do tuck some things like that. I make sure they each find a place because the kids that did bring ideas to the table, I want them to feel validated. I'm not saying everybody gets, a trophy, but it's worth considering everything shared. It took bravery and courage and intention to step up, to share the idea, and we're going to find a home for it for the moment. Look at it more deeply, and if we decide it can't be used, then we have that conversation and we learn how to process those feelings. But I definitely want to validate the fact that they did bring something to the table. So where can it fit for now? But I definitely make them know that they can change. Nothing is set in stone yet. We will come to a point where things have to be set in stone. But at the moment, we're not there. I told them, too, once we sort of looked at these lists all together, I said, okay, so many of you I know in my mind, because you offered the suggestion, I know where you're going to end up. You don't necessarily have to end up in that scene today. You can go wherever you'd like today. So some kids, as predicted, did go where I thought they would in terms of creating groups to work on these various ideas. Other kids kind of were like, not really sure. So I said, well, what idea are you drawn to? What do you think you could help flesh out? What even just interests you a tiny bit? And I would make suggestions of where maybe they could go, what group they could potentially join. And as always, I prefaced the entire group. Let's say you're working in a group and somebody strolls on by and says, I'd like to work with you. What do you say? And we got the right answer. They said, yes, we're going to welcome them in. And I also said, too, don't feel like you're locked into a group. If you're not feeling it, that's okay. You can abandon it, and it's not like you're quitting something. And the group members there, like, no hard feelings. We're so early in this process. We're literally, like, trying on, costumes. Does this one feel right? No. Okay, I need to try something else. It's not what I'm feeling. So there's no, we're being very objective at this point with regard to how we make our choices, how we react to others making their choices and things like that. So again, we had kids that knew right where they wanted to go. We had kids that weren't sure, so I knew them a little bit enough to kind of send them in a way. And then it was like maybe there was an idea that wasn't really being worked on, and I was like, I really want them to work on this. And I have some kids that aren't really in a group, or they're impartial to being anywhere specific. So I'm like, why don't you work on this one? Let's see what you do with that. And I give them that concept to build on, because I want to see it get developed. So,
well, here then, we had the kids breaking out into groups, and Allie, as we have seen her do many times before when kids have broken out into groups, will meander from group to group, checking in, and for those who may be having particular difficulty, Allie, you said you work to provoke raw material that they could then take and run with. And you mentioned that it turned out that the kids used different vehicles to generate and test ideas, whether it was through improvisation, and ideas started to emerge and they could play with them a bit, whether it was more classic brainstorming, where they're literally writing down key plot points. So can you give us a bit of a summary of the details of a couple of these different groups in terms of the ideas that they came up with and how they chose to approach this first stage in the playwriting process?
Yeah. As we mentioned, a lot of groups, or a couple of groups in this particular, we had about 5 or 6 different scenes being developed or so. We had improving, so I had a little girl who was obsessed with Matilda, and she's like, I want to be Matilda. I'm like, you can be Matilda. And it was interesting because she and another girl started talking about a scene, and I left them. They were playing. They were both young, 6th graders, having a blast, doing all of these things. I'm like, they got it. They don't need me. They're off in like playing land. That's where they should be right now. And they actually came back to me so excited with like a dance all done. Like they can come up with things very quickly. Can it be totally useful? I don't really know yet. We'll see. But her whole idea turned from being Matilda and sort of recreating a scene or having a spin-off scene, actually turned into Matilda meets Annie, like Annie. So like, how cute is that, right? It's the two little girls, very different backgrounds, also both kind of like, you know, a little feisty. And then they had this whole meeting, and now they're like so locked into that. So just through the playing and the brainstorming, instead of having more of this thing very structured within the concept of the world of one play, all of a sudden now we have these two really adorable, lovable, strong female characters engaged and interacting, and we're going to see where that story goes. So that was really exciting because I didn't expect that. I don't know that they expected that, but it was like so perfect and how this organically kind of evolved just out of playing, you know, just out of being characters that they felt endeared towards. We also had another improv where some girls were creating kind of like a chorus line idea, which is interesting because a lot of times what they see on the stages that are older than them and older siblings and all of this, they tend to mimic, which is okay. So they kind of came up with this sort of chorus line audition-y sort of scene. So I saw a bunch of girls in conference with them. They were creating different characters that might be involved in this scenario. With regard to brainstorming, I had 3 groups that were pretty locked in with their brainstorming. I would say the most structured, we have the Hunger Games. They want to have some sort of flow, whether it be dramatizing something that has already been written or creating fan fiction, their own spin-off stories with the characters from the book, and potentially adding their own as well. So they were brainstorming lists of plot points and things that they might want to include and all of that. And they were doing that on their laptops, their computers, which is really great because they can share their docs, whatever they're creating with me, and I can see it, and we can comment, and then like, so I don't even have to be there necessarily. Even later, I can read what they did, do a comment or a question, they can comment right back, and I can see it, and we don't have to be together at that time. So they can continue to work even when we don't have the time necessarily face to face. So that's technology that's new, which is fantastic. Right. Really makes a difference, I think, in when you're time constricted there. We also had a scene of dead memes. This is very popular on the internet right now, and I actually had to do a little work myself to be like, is this something you just saw and like you're totally copying the idea of? But apparently it's a really popular concept, so it's something that they can play with. It's not one idea that they're taking from and building upon. So they spent some time listing all of the memes that they could possibly think of. They were really cute because they were like, this could be full cast, so we gotta get so many, and they were like thinking of like so many different characters that the full cast can participate in should the scene turn into something. Right. And again, they were doing that on, they were writing down their ideas. And then we also had our cringeworthy, our awkward moment scene. They came up with a very loose plot line, and we're going to be conferencing because I did see it. It wasn't particularly strong in the sense of what they're trying to do. And we discussed this at our last Videocast, where cringeworthy could be funny to some, but just plain out mean for others, depending on what this is. So we were creeping into the territory of, is this objective, or is this making fun of somebody? Like, where are you really going with this? Because to me, I'm not cringing. I'm just feeling like that person's being a jerk right now. You know, so we're going to have a conversation. But it's so early in the stage, and their intention is not to be like cruel to anybody. So I think we just need to, again, talk about what it is they really want to achieve in this scene. And how can we do that in a way that draws out the emotion, not so much just poor behaviors on stage, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does. I wonder, without having any idea, when you first mentioned the idea of cringeworthy material, might it be situations that teens typically encounter that make them feel awkward, and that's almost a universal kind of experience where together they may be able to take that proverbial step back and maybe laugh at it, or be able to say, oh my God, what a period of time this is that we have to go through, and stuff that's really common to them, and in fact perhaps brings them together, because it's such an awkward stage of life.
It's so that's exactly what it is. Yeah,
perhaps that is something that would be productive, and how great to be able to laugh a little bit at things that in fact are quite difficult.
Yeah, they can be difficult, they can be painful. I think that they themselves, though, don't want to stumble into a realm of just like glorifying bad behavior versus providing material that people can connect with, like that feeling of embarrassment that we experience, and that's the line that I think that they're a little confused on based on what they've created so far. It's just kind of like one person kind of doing things that were mean to another, and that person feeling bad. And I think we can get more creative than that. I think we can get more context than just some behavior that is just like, really, like that's not awkward, that's just like watching someone make a bad choice and hurt someone's feelings, like you know what I mean. So, and we want to connect and empathize with the character who is feeling this awkwardness, not just being like they're a victim and like and those people are mean. Like it's so much more complex than that, these experiences, and I think they can do better, quite frankly, than what I've seen them come up with. But again, so early in the process, I'm not surprised I'm seeing this. It's typical. This is like the first things that might pop up, and now we refine them. Now what are the parts of these that are strong? What is it really trying to show here? And then how can we do that? So. Nobody had a complete dramatic arc just yet, but I wouldn't expect them to either. Some of them think they do, which is really cute. like Annie and Matilda are like, and then this, and then this, and then this, and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, okay, now you have them like traveling to Europe, which is okay, but like we're looking at like 15 pages here, kids, based on what you're describing and what we want to, how many pages that typically take. Like, it's pretty fun to watch them go, but they're supposed to be doing that now. We get everything out so that we can have this this clay that we can then mold into something really viable. So
I guess that really leads me into my final question, which is then, were these ideas that you've just described to us as examples and the ways that they were generated pretty typical for this first stage of playwriting? Would this have been what you would have expected to see?
Yeah, I think at this stage, for sure. We have simple things that are still pretty simple. We have more complex things, and in terms of like the particular kids who are creating these various things, I'm not surprised that that's kind of where they're at and what they've brought. And I'm really excited to see how this morphs and changes, and how various groups may blend and change, and who's going to bring what. I might even note like maybe some of these ideas that are a little weaker, cute, or the word cute, I mean, I can't help it, they're cute. They're cute. They're adorable. But they are. But also cute can be really strong and viable, but maybe it needs a boost. It needs articulation. It needs more of a mature vision of the bigger picture, not just the cuteness of what these adorable humans came up with on a Wednesday afternoon. So what I might do is, for example, like with the two girls, I might send some older kids that I know that have experience that will work well with them to kind of go in, step in, start workshopping with them under my guidance. But I might even talk to the older kids separately and say, this are the weak spots. What can you do to help strengthen them without compromising their initial nugget, if you will? We're going to build together, but I need your skills to help teach them to build their skills. And again, there's that scaffolding and all of that working together. So,
well, this is really great from my standpoint, because this is process in its rawest form. I mean, we're really watching their development as well as the it's an inextricably linked with the development of their work, but watching it unfold in real time and identifying all of the different dynamics that come together to shape that trajectory, literally week by week now. And I think,
and it's like weeks,
and it's right,
it's weeks.
It's weeks. It's weeks away.
I might seem like very like, hey, it's fine, but no, like I am definitely like, oh my gosh, like I want them to be further ahead inside. I'm like, just get it done, but that's not how we can foster this. So I have to keep my own stuff at bay. Not in terms of ideas for them, but my own like anxiety really is what it is, and my own fears of will this really get pulled off, my own fears of how the heck is this going to turn into something, and also we have so many ideas, I don't know if all of them are going to make it, and then you got to sort of pick and choose what will and what won't. So there's a lot of emotion for myself that's tied up in this, both positive and negative, and an underlying fear that come our performance night, like, are we going to have what we want it to be? And I have to remind myself that we've done this in the past. It's been successful. It will never be like any other, as it's designed to not be like any other show that was. So I really have to just put my faith into it and put my faith into them and keep all my ducks in as much of a neat row as possible, so that they have the structure they need to be able to design and create with free reign. So it's kind of an interesting balance there.
Well, maybe this is the somewhat cliched term where it would be appropriate about trusting the process, because it seems to me that for them to be able to do the things they're going to need to be able to do, they have to go through this process. That you're not, I mean, and it's tough because as a director, you're, oh God, I'd like to see it here on the continuum, but, they can't, I would imagine, just simply jump from here to here. It's a going through, and if it's a slog for them, I would imagine it's a slog for you too. So I think it's great how Allie's helping us understand how this whole setup is really challenging for you.
It's a lot more anxious for me because I know where we're supposed to be, not in the moment right now, but where we're headed, and they're just doing their thing right now.
Right.
I'm not stressing them out with, we have to have things done by this. There's no deadlines yet, because I don't want to stifle any creativity. So I'm just kind of bearing the brunt of it at the moment, and that's okay. That's my role. It's okay. I'll take it.
And this, but I imagine that this is the case for you year in and year out.
Yeah.
If you've got a showcase to do.
Yeah. So for me, it's managing that.
Exactly. And I would wonder if, to some degree, depending upon the scenario, if directors have to wrestle with this to some extent or another. I mean, maybe not as much with seasoned professional actors and actresses, let's say, in a Broadway setting, or maybe so, I don't know, but certainly with young, emerging talent. That
I don't know, though, because the expectation for something like professional is that you've got to hit this mark. That's what you're being paid to do. That's what you're trained to do. That's what you were hired for. There's a lot more room for, oh, that was adorable in my world. So it's almost like the stress, like mistakes can be made. It's not going to be as strong because they're kids. And it's not like I'm not holding them to a high expectation, but I think in terms of like a stress level, just because I'm sort of entering into the unknown, I don't even know what our show will be versus something, of course, that is being produced professionally. I think the expectation of the level is very clear in the professional world, and therefore it's the stress to meet that known expectation could potentially be stronger than where I'm coming from, where nobody has next. Nobody knows what it's going to be. It could be anything. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. I think it could be pretty matched.
It's
just in
interesting.
different realms, different ways.
Although presumably your professionals have the toolkits already.
Yeah. So really you're taking it here, but then boom, they should be skyrocketing.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of, it's hard to, I mean, each presents its own set of challenges.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. So stay with us, as we always say, especially now, as, you know, we can never predict what is to come, but I think it'll be particularly fascinating to identify the elements that comprise this process, and with these particular kids. So thank you again for sharing with us, Allie, as always, and now I just can't wait for next week.
Thank you.
Hope it's the same for you too. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.